I'll start by reading your bio.
All right.
Thanks for being here. So, as everyone knows, Rasheed Newson is the author of the national bestseller, My Government Means to Kill Me. The novel was a Lambda Literary finalist for gay fiction and was named one of the 100 notable books of 2022 by the New York Times. His forthcoming novel, There's Only One Sin in Hollywood, is slated for publication by Flatiron in 2026, next year. As everyone also knows, Rasheed is a celebrated television drama writer, producer, and showrunner. Along with his screenplay writing partner, TJ Brady, he co-developed and is executive producer of Bel-Air. The drama series has won 3 NAACP Image Awards and has been nominated several times for Best Drama Series. Additionally, you worked on The Chi, Animal Kingdom, and Narcos, among other drama series. So I know that you're besties with Lena Waithe and everybody else.
Friends in Hollywood.
Rasheed was born and raised in Indianapolis, Indiana. He is a graduate of Georgetown, and he currently lives with his husband and their 2 children in Pasadena. So thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Your ring light makes you look amazing. I need to get one. I actually still don't have one. So
I mean, there was something like maybe 3 years ago, because it's like, okay, we're going to all be doing these meetings, where it just became, we better invest in what's happening.
Yes, like, my friends have all been telling me that as well.
No, you put on your face cream, you do a little Vaseline on the lips, all of it has to happen.
I have all of that. Well, I'm learning from the pro. So I guess without further ado, let's jump into this because I don't want to take up too much of your time. But for people who've read the book, they already know this, but I'm going to give a brief overview for anybody who hasn't read yet or listened to it, which all of you should buy the book if you haven't. And again, one reason why we're talking now, the book came out in 2022, we're 2025, but one thing you mentioned to me is that it became a bestseller when it went into paperback.
It became a bestseller when it went into paperback this past February. So, 2.5 years after the journey began, it suddenly hit the USA Today bestsellers list, which was lovely.
Yeah. So for us, it's brand new, even though it's...
You haven't read it, it's new to you.
Well, the story starts in 1985 in New York. Actually, May 1985, so 40 years ago this month. And our protagonist, Trey Singleton, is 18, and it progresses over a couple of years. So we see Trey grow up while he's in the big bad city. He's telling the story from a series of lessons. So each of the chapters are a lesson. And correct me if I'm wrong, but he's looking back from 50 years in the future. So 10 years from now, basically 2035. And it's packed full of tons of information. So anyone who doesn't know some of the New York history, especially in the 80s, you will learn a lot. Trey's parents are wealthy former Black Panthers. That's correct as well, right? They were, or at least activists.
They went from activist to capitalist, which happens.
Hanging out with Angela Davis. She's still an activist, but now they became lobbyists for Eli Lilly.
Yeah.
And they have, what were you going to say?
They cashed in.
So they have these powerful connections in DC, and they are not happy about Trey's gayness. So he rejects it all. He runs away from Indianapolis, does not want his trust fund, his, I assume, high 6 figures trust fund that he does not want, leaves the mansion and runs to New York, has nothing to do with your life. I know, not at all. And he eventually finds himself at the forefront of the gay rights movement in the 80s during the HIV/AIDS crisis. And actually, hopefully this isn't a spoiler, but he does get involved as a founding member of ACT UP. So that's actually pretty cool as well. And there's been many great reviews, but I did find this one that I liked. The Harvard Review, the critic writes that My Government Means to Kill Me marries the radical sentimentality of Leslie Feinberg's Stone Butch Blues with the jarring odyssey of Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man. And I thought it was great that he yoked those two things together. I mean, it's pretty amazing to be compared to Ralph Ellison. So what did you think of that?
I think that comparison flatters a great deal. But I'm not going to be shy about saying, I'm swinging for those fences. I wanted to write a book that I thought would hold up for the ages, and to really speak to that praise. I wanted to write somebody who was writing about a time in life when you're incredibly young and you're getting your first tastes of freedom, and that's really exciting and intoxicating. And you haven't quite figured out all the rules of how the world is supposed to work, which is also great because then you don't you don't play along as easily as maybe some people who are older. You push
Right.
boundaries, and you can find new ways of existing. And I wanted that. And I also I wanted to write about somebody who discovers really who they are. I mean, at some point, when we're adults, we kind of present ourselves as if we've always been this way. But those changes, like to become the Jerry that is the Jerry in front of me, there was a point where you went through something and then everything sort of solidified, or you got the courage to be who you are.
Right.
And I wanted to write about a character who was figuring that out.
Yeah, I mean, he gets a taste of a lot of things, and
Well, it can
and
be, as you get older, you can forget what joy it is when suddenly you just live somewhere and no one is monitoring what you eat, when you go to bed, and who you're sleeping with.
yes,
And those are really big joys. We don't necessarily talk about them when people talk about their first job or their first car, their first marriage. How about your first hookup, your first one night stand, that sort of stuff? That also that's always interested me.
and also his first bathhouse. I mean, some of my favorite scenes are set at the Mount Morris Baths in Harlem. I actually live in West Harlem, and so it was great to have something that's set up here because not a lot is always set here. And you give us some lusty and very delicious descriptions of his many, many,
Yeah.
many sexual encounters.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, well, that's a part of being young for some of us. We're exploring a lot of freedom. The thing I tried to tap into that I remember from being young is I remember that feeling of, ooh, not only is it lovely I get to go home with this guy, but I hope I learn something new tonight. I
right,
hope somebody puts their tongue or their finger or their mouth somewhere I didn't know you could do that. And that's an added bonus. I think oftentimes sex is sort of written in this sort of puritanical way. You're ashamed of it. You're not sure. You're not good at it. But I mean, some of us take to it like a fish to water, and it's it's just it's just glorious to behold. And it's I mean, no pun intended. It could be a wonderful release when the rest of your life isn't necessarily going well. Um,
right,
in my early 20s, I was not having the success I wanted as a writer. I was broke. Boy, it was really nice to know I could go out on a Friday night and find someone beautiful who would go home with me. Should you rest all your self esteem on that? No. But it can be a healthy part of your self esteem.
right. Well, I really appreciated that you gave us such vivid and honest descriptions of his sexual appetite and experiences, especially with HIV/AIDS being part of it, because I know that people can get really critical and actually say like, "Oh, he should always be using a condom," or "Why is he doing all of these things and being so promiscuous?" And often we get a lot of sex writing that ends up being either about trauma. And so we don't get a lot of just fun sex. And then if it's too fun, then people think it's erotica. And you've been able to balance this. So tell me a little bit about being able to write these sex scenes without it becoming, maybe considered prurient or something.
Well, I think it wasn't. I mean, I didn't think the sex scenes were just to be sex scenes, right? Like, I think they should be telling you something about the
Absolutely.
character and the people involved. So in this book, Trey, in a lot of ways, is learning to negotiate. What is it I think I deserve? What kind of pleasure am I into? What is it people expect from me? Why are they attracted to me? And how do I negotiate that? Do I have to deliver? Do I have to assume and pretend to be your fantasy? And so he's got a lot of learning to do in that arena, just as he does in the political arena, just as he does in his friendships. So there is sex, most of it very positive, but also it matters. I don't think sex is frivolous. I think it tells us a lot about how you see yourself and what you are willing to accept or demand from those around you.
Oh, I love that. I mean, and also, if he hadn't been at the Mount Morris Baths, he wouldn't have met the luminary Bayard Rustin, which I thought was like, I was like, what? Like Bayard is at the Mount Morris Baths? This is amazing. And you give footnotes saying like, there's no confirmed evidence that he was ever there. Tell me a little bit more about that first, about giving
Well,
those
I'll
footnotes.
tell you. I mean, one of the things that I love about Bayard Rustin is that, like, beyond his other work is, he was actually arrested here in Pasadena in the 50s for fooling around with men in a car, two men in a car. So, I mean, he was really good for him. But what it did when I read that or learned that is it introduces him as a sexual being. And what
Yes.
we tend to do with our leaders, our role models, is desex them.
Neuter
It's
them. Yeah.
and it's particularly unfortunate for, those of us who are queer because, sex is not an immaterial part of that identity. And so I wanted to say, what if you met him and he's not at a lecture hall and you meet him and he's not wearing all the
A suit and
credentials
tie.
of being this leader? What was great about bathhouses, to the extent they still exist, is everybody is democratized. Everybody's in a white towel, you know? You could be somebody high, you could be somebody low. We're all kind of equals here. And it makes him less intimidating. I don't think Trey would have had the nerve to start a relationship with him if they had met at a dinner party, for
Right.
example, and other people were around. But he finds himself having access to him in a place where, the barriers don't seem so high.
Right. Well, for all those who've recently joined, we're talking about Bayard Rustin. Here's his book, I Must Resist. If you don't have it, it's his life and letters. So check it out. Um, he becomes sort of Trey's other father figure, his mentor, his Yoda and
Yeah.
his hero's quest. So, I mean, I thought that it was really lovely that you were able to introduce him to a new generation and people who might not be familiar. Obviously, now we have the Rustin movie that's on Netflix that stars Coleman Domingo. So now, of course, I'm imagining naked Coleman Domingo in my head while I'm.
Not a bad way to spend your time.
But when you saw that movie, because obviously you were working on the book and had Rustin in yours before it came out, what was your reaction to this new portrayal of him?
Oh, I mean, first of all, Coleman does a great job portraying him. And I mean, I really enjoy that movie. I think that movie is being respectful and it is trying to introduce people who maybe don't know the first thing about Mr. Rustin. I am being irreverent and I'm trying to shake up maybe how you view these people you think if you follow political
Yeah.
history or queer history in particular.
Well, I actually think it is respectful in its own way because you are giving him a sexual life. And, I've actually met Walter Nagel, his husband, after he received the Presidential Medal of Freedom from Obama. And I want to interview him because they had a crazy relationship. He actually had to get adopted by
Yeah.
Rustin to be, his legal heir. So he became his son, literally,
Yeah.
which I think is freaky. But
No,
anyway.
I've met Walter, who read the book and did a book event with me, and it was lovely in the end. There was a little touch and go. I I mean at one point we'd signed up to do the event, and then he showed up, and he was a bit frosty, and we were going on stage in like 15 minutes. And I'm like, Walter, what's wrong? I mean, and he goes, I said, I thought you enjoyed the book. And he goes, well, that's till I finished it. And I'm like, whoo, I'm in trouble. Well, what seems to be the problem? And I finally was like, look, it's the book's out. You're not going to hurt me. Just tell me. And it was interesting because, without giving too much away, Walter, or I'm sorry, Bayard gives Trey some advice towards the end of the book. And Walter says, I don't think he would say that. I don't think he would have advised him that way. And I stipulated, I'm sure you're right. All right. I'm doing a fictional version and I need my hero to break from his mentor and kind of go his own way.
Yeah.
But I mean, and so when we go out there, you should say that. You should tell them that. That's fine. That's an honest response and a critique. And I can withstand it.
Yeah.
And it all just sort of, and it was lovely. Then it was lovely. I think, you know, it's fine, especially when you're dealing with works that we don't always have to agree on every point or even at all. You know, I think there's something about being queer. There's this feeling of we have to champion any and everything sort of made from our community. And I understand why we felt that way in the beginning because we got so few shots at representation. It was like, if we don't rally around this, they may not let us have another one. I think we've evolved to that next stage where you could just say, look, this isn't for me. I'm not obliged to
Right.
like everything made by every Black filmmaker and writer alive. And, the same goes for those of us who are queer.
Well, you also queer some people that I think people would maybe appreciate. They're more villains.
Yeah.
So you also you also
George
introduce a
Santos is in prison or going to prison. I mean, we're not all great.
well, there's a moment where Trey and his roommate Gregory, who mainly has sex with older conservative white men, those are his sugar daddies. They go to a party at Tex Udell's house, and actually in the Dakota, and of course Trey actually wants to see Lauren Bacall. He's more hoping that he'll see Lauren Bacall, but Marvin Liebman is there, Tex Udell, and also William F. Buckley. And there's a moment where Bill Buckley even fondles Trey's dick, and he says, "I
Yeah.
could not be more limp." Tell me
Yeah.
about that, because I mean that is one that people might
Well,
be more shocked by.
that rumor about Bill Buckley has been floating around and had been out there. I mean, what I try to do when I'm writing historical fiction is I try not to write something completely out of the character of the public person. So I wouldn't turn Senator Moynihan into a cannibal. No one ever said he was. There's no evidence of that. And that seems unfair.
That would be
But
satire.
yes, yeah. But like both with like Mayor Ed Koch, those stories persisted long before I came around.
Mhm.
And I said, let's play them as if they're true. I mean, one of the things that happened, this is just the timing of a book. My book had already been locked, but it hadn't come out yet when the New York Times finally broke the story that Ed Koch was in fact gay and had a lover he was hiding in California. And
Yeah.
I so desperately was like, can we open the book back? Like I mean, I already had him sleeping with Gregory, but if I had known that story was going to break, I could have gone further and I could have gone harder. I could have had him show up, so
Well, I will
but
share
I
with
tried.
you I will share with you and the rest of the people here. I actually had lunch with Ed Koch at the Four Seasons in 2007, and I was basically being used as bait to try to get him to come out. I was his editor at New York Press, and
Oh my.
and we basically asked him like, Mayor Koch, will you come out? I mean, anyway, it was like a whole thing. I felt very much like he was fondling me under the table, not officially, but
Uh,
like there was definitely some squeezes, and and then Barbara Walters came to the table. It was one of these very New York moments, right, where he stopped everything and was like, "Oh my God, now Barbara's here!" And like I remember Sumner Redstone and all these other hoity-toity people were all nearby. But anyway, I did not get Ed Koch to come out, but I'd been waiting for that moment as well
but it but
and
it but
tried
it sort
to.
of gotten to a point of almost an open secret.
Right?
Yeah.
Yes, he was
And I
not
find those
out
things
publicly, but
interesting.
everyone knew. Yeah.
Yeah, I find those things very interesting and I love when you can sort of poke at them.
And he lived in the same building as Larry Kramer, and you have Larry in the book as well. And I've been in Larry's apartment, and it was very moving meeting him. And yeah, he was an irascible, difficult person, but he was also a legend.
Well,
So,
when I was in college, I volunteered in DC, and I worked in nonprofits in my early 20s. And the thing about it is, I met a lot of people who are, would take the spiritual out of it, but you could call them living saints. And yet you would be frightened to do anything wrong around them. Like this idea that everybody had to be sweet and endlessly lovable is not true. And in fact, if you are involved in, sort of service work, you have to be very tough to endure that kind of work and stress for a long
mhm,
time. And so these were people who were not to be trifled with. And I wanted to put some of that into the book, that not everybody who is
yeah,
quote good has to be a goody two shoes.
absolutely, absolutely. I mean, you had to have a thick skin as well. Um, so to go back to our naked Reston wise man,
Yes.
um, over the course of the novel, as I said, he does become his surrogate father. And he is a major character. I mean, he's like in the second tier of the main, or maybe
Yeah.
even one of the main characters. Tell me just briefly, like, what kind of research did you do to like kind of excavate that man?
Well, it feels like I've been doing research all my life on a lot of these people. I mean, I joke around sometimes that, when I write historical fiction, of course, it's the gay 80s in New York and not, Victorian, high court. I didn't pick some place where I'd have to start from zero. And so that age had always I feel like I've seen all the documentaries. I knew some of the people. I read the books. I tell people, writers now, especially if you're doing historical fiction, if you're writing anybody who lived in the age of audio, it's great because they're just hours and hours and hours of interviews with them. And I would
Mm.
put it on when I was like stuck in traffic or, riding my bike. And just to get some sense of the voice in
Hmm.
me. And then you can sort of do your own thing. You just need a feel for it. But it's endless research. And probably the thing that's hardest for me is not trying to pack it all in to the point that I'm abusing the reader. Because I could go deeper, but it's like, okay, this is enough. Let's move on. But it's endlessly fun. And I will say, just in terms of like using real people in this book, I came at it sort of backwards. I didn't want to initially, um, because I wondered about, will there be blowback from estates and people who knew them and that sort of thing. But the truth is, I also didn't want to write a book where there was a stand-in for Bayard Rustin and people were suddenly
Hmm.
saying to me, "Oh, is this supposed to be Rustin? Is this supposed to be
Hmm.
Larry Kramer?" And then you have to explain, "Well, why didn't you make it then? Because you were scared?" So I just, I
Well,
said, "Well,
and
just do it."
you can't defame the dead, and so you were fine. So,
There is
um,
that.
so the other main relationship throughout the book is Trey's relationship with his roommate Gregory, which is wild. They meet by chance. Trey's attracted to Gregory. He's hot, Haitian. I think you said 6 foot or 6'2".
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and they never have sex, even though Trey wants to. But they have this real lovely display of what I've started calling the elasticity of queer relationships, thanks to our mutual friend Manuel Betancourt, because when I talked to him, we were talking about the elasticity of queer friendships and
Yeah.
relationships. So, and Trey says he feels fortunate that Gregory chose him as a friend and a roommate. He prays that he'll fuck, and then he says he loves him madly. He's sexy, street smart, and glamorous, everything he wanted to be one day. They cuddle and fight and seem bound to one another until it all blows apart. But I just want to say, like, I don't think I've read that sort of fluid queer male relationship before, right? Like, either people are gonna fuck or they're not gonna have relationships.
Yeah, no, and I mean, like, I've had some really good friendships which started with me certainly wanting to fuck. And then it didn't happen for whatever reason, and then maybe we're both grateful it didn't happen, but we love each other and we get along very well. And also, I've had a lot of relationships because, you move a lot or you go from one to the country to the other. I've had relationships that were really intense, really transformative, and they didn't last my whole life. I mean, I've had really intense relationships with people. Maybe we were in the same summer program and I never saw them again. I think that's probably harder to do now in the way we're all connected with
Right.
social media and stuff. But I still grew up in an age where you could lose touch with someone and it wasn't necessarily the end of the world. I kind of look at this world now where the idea is like, best friends for life. I'm like, whoa, hold on. Like, how do I know who I'm going to be in 20 years, 40 years? How do I know this is going to um, and I don't think there's anything wrong with relationships that last how a season and are really great. And so it's sort of fun. When I first wrote the book, I knew they were never going to sleep together, but I had a problem where early readers said, "Oh, I was waiting for them to fall in love," because that's how our stories are often told. Like, well, I mean, the story's over when he finds like a boyfriend and he's happy. And I was like, wait a minute, that's not certainly in my 20s.
Hmm.
That was not my dream. That was not how it played out. And I didn't want to enforce those things. So early in the draft, I had to stipulate, oh, these two never sleep together. Otherwise, readers were waiting for it to happen. And
Hmm.
somehow almost felt like a promise had been made that it would.
Well, I am gonna disagree with you because they do actually sleep together. They just don't have sex.
Yes. Yes.
so, so the euphemism doesn't stand.
Yeah. But people, I mean, I was sort of surprised that people, I mean, these were friends of mine because it was early
Right.
readers who were like, "Oh, I thought you were writing a love story." And
Right.
I'm like, "Oh, no, that's not, not that kind of love story."
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that is perfect because I do want to talk about three other types of queer love that I was really into. And since we're the Queer Love Project, that's what we're going to do. So, so amid Trey's erotic adventures, and he gets turned on to political organizing and advocacy, but the first camaraderie, and I know I'm going back to Mount Morris again, but he does have this violent moment. I'm not going to give it away for people who haven't read yet, but this violent moment in the dark room at the bathhouse. And then these other regulars who are ostensibly strangers defend him. And one guy whose name's either Ernie or Aaron, and Trey's never sure,
Can't
which
remember.
totally understand. He protects him and acts as a sort of bodyguard, and then Trey makes out with him and gives him a hand job. But then after that, Trey is accosted again, and Marcel, the guy who runs the place, protects him. But later, after that, Trey says, only in that rundown bathhouse was there a group of people who I could count on to care enough about me to get involved, to come to my defense. It felt liberating that I could warrant that type of protection. And I was like, whoa, like, that is something that we all know as queer people, or hopefully most of us know as queer people, but it's not something that people who are maybe not gay or queer or trans would understand. So tell me about being able to get that in there.
I will say, I think most women get it. The idea that your physical safety can be threatened on a dime, and you can't exactly count on anyone else around coming to help you is, I would imagine that a lot of women relate to that fear. But it is one that is you don't know how tired you are until you kind of get to sit down. And so I think he's been living under that sort of assumption that I've got to be on guard. I've got to be on guard. It's just me. I've got to look out for myself. Um, and then suddenly he's in this place where it's like, well, wait a minute, we've got you. And it's a huge moment for him to realize people can do that for you. I went to Georgetown University, which is the oldest Catholic university in the country. So they tell you. And I was gay then, and I kind of knew I had to be on guard in terms of who I told and how gay I got. I mean, there was always happening. And then I had a boyfriend who worked in DC, and he would go to parties with him, and they were all gay. And I would get emotional because we could just sit on the couch with our arms around each other, like intertwined, and these other men were around, and we're watching some movie. And it suddenly hit me that, like, that simple thing of like, oh, I can just relax here. I didn't realize I'd been missing it until I finally got it. And I think this is one of those moments for him. He didn't realize how on guard and how alone he felt until finally it's like, oh, there are people who actually care about me.
And I think that that's important to point out because even as queer people at our parents' homes, often we don't feel that way. I know every time I would be with somebody, I would always be worried that a parent would walk in and you'd jump up.
The door's gonna open.
And even now in my 40s, when that happens and I'm there with my husband, I'm like, and I remember like, wait, I think it's okay that I'm allowed to be touching here at my parents' house. But,
well, I mean, you talked about, I mean, they are strangers, but there was a brotherhood then that I like to think is maybe coming back. But it's certainly, there was a feeling of we've got to look out for each other. And he's finally getting some of that. And it's powerful.
So I want to play a part of the audiobook. Hopefully this will work. But Jelani Aladdin narrated your book, and he does an amazing job. And in chapter 6, which is lesson number 6, romantic notions are delusions, this comes near the end. If people have the book, it's like on my copy, I think page 76. So let me see if this works. I'm gonna play.
I walked the streets, wiping tears from my eyes. Crying while I made my way past fellow pedestrians was not an uncommon way for me to travel. In fact, plenty of people sobbed and wailed on the sidewalks in those days. Emotions ran free and raw. It wasn't what Gregory had said about me that set me off. It was what I'd said about myself. I take what I can get. It sounded desperate and weak as it came out of my mouth, and I wished it were different. There were moments when I imagined what it would be like to have a man approach me in a record store and strike up conversation and invite me to go have coffee with him. Or a less common scenario, but applicable to me, After fucking each other's brains out in the bathhouse, the man at my side asked for my phone number and suggests we grab dinner and catch a movie sometime. Nothing of the kind ever happened to me, and while I did suspect that a square, decent man would bore me, it also ate at me that none ever approached me. The men with a sexual interest in me saw what, exactly? A young male that they could dominate? A baby-faced preppy that they could defile? A young black stud who could dick them down? A sexual deviant who was seducing them into breaking their moral codes? I was forbidden fruit. I was a living sex doll. I was a dirty secret. Alas, I wasn't first date material. My self-pity and defeatist thinking did eventually lead me to a useful realization as I waited on the corner for a red light to change. I saw the Empire State Building beaming in the skyline, and my mind replayed my favorite parts of An Affair to Remember. The old film was an obsession of my great Aunt Vera's, who had served as our family's summer break babysitter. She made me, my brother, and my sister play quietly at her feet whenever An Affair to Remember aired as a midday movie on Channel 8. It was of no interest to my siblings, but even as a 7-year-old, the fraught romance, as well as the polished appeal of Cary Grant, hooked me. What I found remarkable was the fortitude driving Cary Grant's love. He had every reason to write off Deborah Kerr, but his affection made him persistent. That's what I craved. A guy willing to pursue me despite my hang-ups, my past, my mistakes, and my own misgivings about him. Of course, when my Hollywood desires became clear to me, I saw how ridiculous they were. What flesh and blood man was ever going to immediately recognize the inner beauty and value in me, then make the effort to machete his way through the thorny thickets of insecurities and defense mechanisms surrounding my heart? And if such a man somehow existed, how long was I supposed to wait until our paths crossed? The odds against it coming to fruition had to be astronomical, which made sense because the very notion I had concocted was a fairy tale. Turns out, Prince Charming and white knights and unwavering love don't exclusively plague the expectations of basic headies. Here I was, nothing if not sexually liberated. I didn't pine for marriage, children, or a house in suburbia. In fact, I'd become devoted to the steadfast fraternity and open polygamy of homosexuality. Every gay man could be a brother to me. Every gay man could be a lover to me. Yet, I harbored these unspoken and awfully wholesome expectations about the love stories that were destined to animate my life. I wanted a boyfriend. Even Gregory, who was tiring of sex work and sugar daddies, wanted a boyfriend. Our boyfriend fantasies were part of a larger collection of common, saccharine notions. Once I detected the useless gnawing desires embedded in me, I was hell-bent on cutting myself open and removing them immediately.
So that's beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
What is it like? What was it like?
Yeah, go ahead.
Listening to that and tell me about this writing that bit.
Well, I mean, it's a lot of how I probably felt in my early 20s. I remember coming back from a club called Chaos in DC, and a guy that, after the deed is done, said to me, "I knew you'd be a great time." And he meant it sweetly as a compliment. And it got in my head, and I just thought, like, why is it people can tell I'm a great time, like, sexually, but nobody ever asked me out for coffee? And I had to work through that. And the other thing that hit me when I was young, and I still feel, is there's sort of a way that heterosexuals, by and large, or homosexuals had to convince heterosexuals, we're not that different than you. So that they would let us visit our lovers in the hospital, so they would bother to create medicine so we didn't die. We really had to stress how similar we were. Your guys' idea of relationships and family, we think it's great, and all we're asking is you let us have one of our own. And, marriage, monogamy, children, that works for a lot of homosexuals. Why should it be the mandate? It shouldn't. Why should it be the ideal? It shouldn't. It isn't. And I wanted some characters who felt that way strongly, because that other story of let me partner up, let me be heteronormative, wins so often you could forget that there are legitimate other ways to live.
Absolutely. I have nothing to add. I totally agree.
Well, it's sad. I mean, in the 70s, that idea of like every man's my brother, every man could be my lover, I mean, was a real sort of ethos that was drawing the community together. Okay, then we have the AIDS crisis. And part of also what happened there is, especially if you're my age and I grew up during the 80s, learning safe sex in the shadow of the AIDS crisis, the thing they told us is you should be afraid of anybody who wants to have sex with you. Because what if they're lying about their status? What if that we should have such distrust that our opening assumption is you could be trying to kill me. It was such a devious, horrible way to make us think. Whereas, by the way, you could have just said, why don't you guys have a conversation and go get tested? Which is, I think, eventually where we got to. But in the beginning, it was be afraid, be very, very afraid. And that is the opposite of you're my brother, you could be my lover.
Right.
I mean, people my age, it can be a very long time before you have sex without fear.
Right.
Because so much of that was sort of embedded. I look now at sort of like ethical non-monogamy, and I'm like, oh, okay, so that idea has different language now, but I can see it's coming back, that people are going, you know what? We don't all have to walk down the aisle 2 by 2.
Well, and it is also another reason why some people during that era, I have friends I know who did decide to latch on and get their life raft and be monogamous because they were so scared that they're like, I'm never going to, I found somebody in college or right out, and that's going to be the rest because I don't want to have to risk it.
Yeah, no, and it's, for a lot of people, that was a working strategy.
Yeah.
It's a working strategy. I think as we sort of, everything should sort of be examined periodically. I'm glad we're examining this. And I'm hoping there's more freedom and lifestyle. It's just something, it knocks me out with people. There's such a pressure for people to have children. Oh, you got to have children. You should have children. If I had to argue, I think too many people had children. People who were not qualified to be parents in any way, shape, or form had children. Maybe we all could be a little more discerning about who's going to have children and why. But that pressure is so pervasive. You almost forget that it's there. It becomes an assumption of life. Don't you want to get married? Why?
Well, I love that it's coming from a man who's married with 2 kids, though.
I am married, yeah. Well, it worked for me. And I will also say I was surprised to get married. Like my friends wanted boyfriends and I wanted a writing career,
Right.
People would have birthday wishes for boyfriends. I wanted an agent. And then I met this guy who just sort of didn't go away and was really funny and sort of like snuck into my heart, and we wanted children, and that meant we had to get married. And so we found ourselves there. But I remember we were about to have our ceremony, and I said to one of my best friends, "Is this too heteronormative? It makes me feel weird. I love him and I'm committed, but and my friend said, "Does it make you feel better that right now it's illegal in 35 states?" And it sort of did.
You're still a renegade, yes.
Yeah. But I would never impose that. Like, I don't think this is my lifestyle choice. I don't think it's better or more I wouldn't argue I'm having a more fulfilling life than people who don't do this.
Right. Well, that is the difference between you and many conservatives. So, so I want to talk about chapter 9, which is when you introduce, it's called Touch at Least One Dead Body. And it's when you introduce Angie, who has a home hospice. She's a lesbian and she's caring for many dying men from complications to HIV and AIDS. And Trey is sort of surprised that he has this kinship with this woman and this lesbian. And at one point he even says lesbians had no place in my life. And Angie is like, what? And she schools him. Yeah. And I thought that was really great that you introduce this really powerful lesbian character, but also you show that bond that is not sexual, that, many people always talk about how gay men and lesbians don't have anything in common and we don't get along. And yet they're the ones who basically saved gay men during the AIDS crisis. So tell me a little bit about the need to include Angie in that side of the story.
Well, in my experience, when I was in college, I volunteered for years at a foster care home for children who were HIV positive or living with AIDS. And so, in my years as volunteers, I saw a lot of staff workers who were permanent members who ran those group homes, and over the and it they a lot of them were lesbians. Like, where we intersect is in service,
Right.
and so and it was almost unheard of in any service. I mean, I can't imagine any service organization that doesn't have lesbians working in it, like any worth their salt, at least. And so later in life, when I got older and I sort of became aware that, oh, there's supposed to be this rift, I just thought back to my own experience where it was like, no, they were all around and we were all around each other. Now that it took service to bring us together, I can't say why, but that's where it had been, and I wanted that for him. I mean, if Trey is coming to New York as a runaway, then you're trying to put a family together, and he needed a big sister.
Mm-hmm. That's a really good point. Yeah, it is a sort of chosen family sibling relationship. And yeah, I'm not going to give away what happens with all that because it's the climax of the book, but it's really powerful, and I hope everyone reads it. So,
well, it's I mean, of all the people he meets, he prioritizes that relationship.
Right.
I mean, that is that. I mean, when he goes, who am I going to lay it down for? It's Angie.
Yep.
And yeah, that was really important to me that he do that.
So I want to make sure that I saw that Kate Bornstein was here and she had to go. And I was actually thinking of Kate, who's a trans pioneer and has done a lot of the things that we're talking about over the years. But I saw also some of our people who were here. They might have questions. If you do have any, feel free to drop those into the chat and let us know if there's anything you want to ask Rasheed. But I wanted to just what was the biggest surprise since the 3 years that the book has been out, or 2.5 or whatever? What has been the biggest surprise for you since then? Reaction from either people or people you don't know, and while you've been on the road and on tour.
Sarah Schulman, who's an activist, and writer, asked me to be part of an event called First Mondays in New York. So I came to do a reading out there, and not having thought about it, if Sarah Schulman invites you to something, guess who's going to be in the audience? It's going to be a lot of people who were involved in ACT UP from the very beginning. That they were aware of my book and that they liked it really blew me away. I had to read something from my new book, and it was so overwhelming that at one point I remember I kind of excused myself. I had to just go cry. I'm a big believer in just go have a good hard cry for 3 minutes and just pull yourself back together. Because I was overwhelmed. I mean, I am very much aware that I'm writing about something, and these people lived it. It's one of those differences, like the lightning bud and lightning. It's that profound a difference. And so but they were really excited that this story was being told, and they got that this was a way to sort of introduce this period of history to younger people. The number of young people who come up to me and the things they're like, I had no idea. I didn't know about this, that, or the other. And then you think about it, well, we don't teach this in school. We don't teach queer history in school in any meaningful way, most places. So those two things, both the people who lived it, not being offended and digging it, and then people who are so young, this might as well be breaking news to them. That has been the most sort of gratifying surprises.
That is intense. I mean, meeting some of those people like Peter Staley and others, it was very profound for me. And I wasn't in New York during that time. But it always felt like this was part of my history, part of my it made me who I am, even though I wasn't there. And so that is an interesting thing to talk about.
I met Peter Staley at a bookstore in Palm Springs. He was having a signing, and then he asked me to sign a copy of my book for him. And he goes, "Oh, I love what you did with Larry," and laugh. I mean, I was just like, I couldn't get over it. I couldn't get over it. It's also, I mean, when these books come out, we're told as authors, look, enjoy it for your season. That you have 3 months, and then if you're a summer book, the fall books will come in, and your book will disappear. So just make your bows pretty quick. That this thing is now coming up on 3 years, and there are still events, and it's showing longevity is a surprise. I wouldn't have dared to think this was going to happen.
Well, tell us about next year's book. What I know there's no pre-orders yet, but hopefully people will pre-order.
No, we have to get it. We get a publication date and a cover, and we'll be ready to go. But I have done. By the way, I have turned in my draft. I am, it's in the hands of the copy editor now. It's called There's Only One Sin in Hollywood, and it takes place looking at the lives of 3 gay Black men in Hollywood in the 1950s and 1960s. I like queer stories. I like political awakenings. The thing I want to just sort of throw out and deal with in this story is, in the 1950s, it would look like what was then called the homophile movement was going to succeed before the civil rights movement. The civil rights movement looked like it had stalled out. And if you were in Hollywood, between, Anthony Perkins and James Dean and Monty Cliff, it looked like the world was going to open itself up to homosexuals, the way maybe Berlin had in the 1920s. And that is a fatal miscalculation for one of these men. And I just want to walk through some of that. Meanwhile, it's also me getting to do what I like, which is historical fiction where, I've got a closeted Black actor who's sort of a rival to Sidney Poitier. His best friend in beard is Diane Carroll, because Diane Carroll's having an affair with Sidney Poitier. And they're kind of great for each other. They can go out together, and he doesn't care that she runs off with Sidney, and she doesn't care that he goes back and fucks the chauffeur. So, I mean, it's just... I wanted to do a gay story in that era that talks a little bit about what we'll call the glass closet, where people sort of know, but they don't bother you, and how that was. I mean, it's typically shown so morose and everybody like miserable. If you're a kid from Gary and you end up with a house in the hills and a pool, and you can make movies and sleep with whoever you want, as far as you know, what's the problem? It all seems great until maybe you get a little bit of political awareness and realize, am I supposed to be doing something else for the other gay men in this country?
So this will be good, because I'm assuming you'll have like George Cukor and all of these other directors. Yeah. Good. You'll educate people. It'll be good.
And it's also just a fun time in Hollywood where there really did look like there was going to be this openness that did not materialize. Anthony Perkins was bringing his boyfriend to set. I mean, what were we, there looked like there was going to be this dawning, and it didn't happen. I mean, do you remember? I mean, and we've lived through this. Does everybody remember when Obama got elected and we were post-racial?
Right.
Do you remember that? Wasn't that fun? Racism was over. We figured it out. We were evolved beyond it, and we would never again fall for those evil tropes and that sort of mindless thinking.
So we have a couple of questions. I see Jessie Sposato, who's actually the executive editor of Narratively, and I have to give her thanks because she helped talk me through my Substack Live anxiety over the weekend, because she's done these before. So thanks, Jessie. But she was wondering, did you have an audience in mind when you were writing? Like, did you think of a specific person, or how did you focus that?
I was thinking of young people. I was thinking of kids in college. And I was thinking that he is either, writing this as part of some lecture tour or some larger thing that he is leaving behind. But which is why I also thought the sex was important. There's been nothing like professors assign this as homework, which also delights me. The idea that I've become homework, or something I've done has become homework or required reading. And one of the things they say is they love going, oh, trigger warning, there's explicit sex in here. Because he's like, then they sort of perk up. He's like, now I've got a chance they're actually going to read it. But it was written with college kids in mind, which is
Right.
also why the footnotes are there. I don't expect people that age to have just all this information at their fingertips. Because again, it's not like we teach it in a lot of schools.
Right.
And I wanted him to tell his story authentically, but I also wanted to say, hey, if you need a little help after class.
Yeah, and I should note that these are not David Foster Wallace type footnotes. These are actually helpful footnotes. So they're not like digressions or
No.
you know.
I read a book. It was the official autobiography of Margaret Thatcher, which just gives you, I mean, the breadth of which I read. I mean, I'm reading her book, but all the footnotes were through the lens of what was this person's relationship with Margaret Thatcher. So, and I thought, oh, what if I did footnotes and the whole, like, that Lena Horne isn't just this beautiful Black woman and actress and groundbreaker, but what I want you to know about Lena Horne is she happened to say that the perfect man for her that she ever met in this world happened to be a gay man who was great for her in every way, except he didn't want her sexually.
Well, there you go. Genevieve had a question. And we talked about how you were listening to like Rustin's speeches and his talking, but she was wondering, when you're writing historical fiction, what else do you turn to? Movies, memoirs? Like, what do you use for your research?
I mean, anything I can get my hands on. So I'll tell you something that happened with, this is, but I don't mind this, but with the new book, There's Only One Sin in Hollywood, Tab Hunter ends up being in the book, but he wasn't originally. I thought Tony Perkins was going to have a larger role. So there's an autobiography on Tony Perkins. It's like 380 pages long. I read it cover to cover. I write this chapter about his Palm Beach house. I set this whole thing up. And then in revisions, I cut all of it. All of it. Except that I needed a gay actor who could sort of be manipulated a little bit. And Tab Hunter had dated Tony. And so I was like, oh, wait, because I'd read the other thing, I was more aware of Tab Hunter. I then, of course, went and read Tab Hunter's autobiography. And again, he's in the book for like maybe 4 chapters. But it is not uncommon for me to watch, documentary, a special, all of it. And, I try not to think about the returns because there's not always great returns. But, I thought Andy Warhol was going to be in my Government Means to Kill Me. And Limelight, I was going to have him work at Limelight. All this research, then it didn't fit. So I'm not I'm a dedicated researcher, but not a very efficient one.
No, but that's an important thing for people to know about the revision process. I've been revising my novel, and it's similar. Like, you basically write 2 books, right? You take out a lot.
Yeah. I've been thought of it that way. Yeah. Well, and also, like, you end up writing a lot of things that you need to know, but you don't need to bore the reader with. I needed to know about this event or this sort of thing.
Right.
Like, in my mind, a lot of the things that get cut from the book still happened. They're just not part of the story I'm telling you at this moment.
Well, in journalism, we call that background. So you have to do all that extra research, even though it never shows up in the piece, because you need to be so immersed in it and know it so well that you're just like living and breathing it, right?
Yeah. Diane Carroll was supposed to be a smaller part of the book, and my God, she just insisted.
Exactly. When you're having fun, you have to let it go. So talking about being a novelist, Simone Caldwell asks about being an aspiring novelist, and should sex scenes be as painfully cringe as it is for her? Is there something she's doing wrong, or what do you give advice about? Believe me, I've been reading a lot about sex scenes because people in my writing group have said, you need more sex in this book. And I'm like, really? I thought that you're not supposed to go there. And then I read your book and I'm like, okay.
Well, by the way, and this is, so I've been working most primarily in television for most of my writing career, where sex scenes, we do it all. I think some of this, if I may, is maybe the MFA program, industrial complex. A lot of there's a set of rules that no one told me.
Right.
I remember Jonathan Escoffrey, who wrote if I survive this, came up to me very early on. We were going on book tours together, and he was like, "How did you get them to let you write sex like that?" And I said, I didn't know that I wasn't supposed to write sex like that. No one. So some of what I've gotten away with may just be no one tried to indoctrinate me in any way about this, that, or the other.
That's funny because when I first met you, I said, "How did you get away with doing the footnotes?" And you were like, "What?"
Yeah,
They made me do more.
No, they did. They pressed that once they were like, "Oh, you're doing these. Let's go ahead and do these." But I mean, what I tell people about sex is like, I mean, you have to, I guess, have your angle on it. What's your attitude about it? I believe sex is a political act. And so if I'm writing a book about a political awakening, which I'm always writing a book about a political awakening, then that's got to be part of it. Because even all these messages we talk about marriage and children and all that, same thing goes for sex in terms of who you're supposed to have it with, what's it supposed to mean to you. These things are made up. And they're, if you're lucky, you get to a point where you realize that and you can sort of decide what they mean for you. And that's what I'm really trying to do when I'm writing about sex. I mean, talk about the next book I'm writing, the one that takes place in Hollywood, the 50s and 60s. I've got somebody who is a submissive bottom into being dominated, except he has none of that language.
Right.
And he is constantly questioning, what does this say about me? Because this is the Eisenhower 50s. I'm supposed to be a man. And I just want this person to like yell at me and, treat me a certain way. And so, yeah, you could be like, Rasheed's writing about S&M, but it does matter to the life of this character. And I think that's how if you can sort of draw a line between I'm writing this for a certain reason, it's shedding light on the inner life of this character, go for it.
Yeah, I think that's essential. It can't be gratuitous. I mean, it can be gratuitous, but it should actually have another point besides just being titillating. But that you just reminded me of, we got Fellow Travelers on TV, which is based on a book, and that had such explicit kinky sex from the 50s. And I think people were shocked seeing Jonathan Bailey and Matt Bomer going at it. So I'm assuming that's part of the research too. But
oh yeah, no. That's to be part of a scene that you don't know is a scene yet, I'm sort of intrigued by that. I'm also, now, I shouldn't say unfortunately. Now, there may be not that great a difference between the romantic expectations of a queer teenager and a heterosexual teenager. What I'm interested in is people who are engaging in sexual relationships where they themselves have no real language or model or concept. I mean, they are making it up as they go along. And that's just very exciting to me.
Mm-hmm. Well, unless there's any other questions, I'm going to wrap it up because you've been so generous with your time, with your talent. And, I can't thank you enough for sharing this time with us. Like,
thank you for having me. Am I the first one you've done?
You're the very first one. As I told you, this is
right.
We popped our cherries together. And and for everyone who hasn't already read it, I just want to make sure you know that it's in paperback. You can get it on Libby. You can listen to it, the audio. It's amazing in audio.
So independent bookstore.
And at your independent bookstore. So make sure you go out and find My Government Means to Kill Me. Rasheed is still loving that you're reading and experiencing this book 3 years later because he was told no one was going to care by this time, and we still care.
That is very lovely. Thank you.
So thank you so much, Rasheed.
Bye-bye.
Bye.